Welcome back to the channel of truth, trust, and transparency. Today may just be one of my favorite YouTube videos I've created yet. I'm going to see if buying one investment property worth $550,000 and holding it for 5 years and selling it is a quicker way to build up your deposit for you to buy a PPR compared to if you were just to save it. So you have two instances. You have some money saved already, $100,000. Should we keep saving hard for 5 years, or should we take that 100,000, invest it, and then in 5 years' time, how much money do we have left? Now, what I really like about these sort of videos is I don't really know what the answer is until I get through all the working out, which might take me anywhere between 20 minutes to an hour. So in this video, I'm going to break down both sides of it. I'm going to try to be as unbiased as possible. As always, if you have any questions or you want to see a part 2, please let me know. But I've worked in a couple of different alternatives as well. So you probably can't come back to me with a few things such as how much can people save. So for this circumstance, I'm just going to assume you are a couple that has a combined income of 250,000. So that could be 125 each. It could be 100, 150, split up however you want. I'm not going to tell you who's earning what in the relationship. Rent at $800 a week. So what I kind of did was, to start off with, the assumption that I've made is there's one person in that couple that's earning $100,000 and the second's earning 150. Now, after we pay tax, I've put both of those incomes into paycalculator.com. After tax, 100 grand comes down to 77,000 and 150 comes down to 110. Meaning your combined after tax salary is $187,000. Sorry, one thing I didn't mention, they've already got 100 grand saved. They've already got 100 grand saved. Now, obviously, what most of us will know that live in Sydney, New South Wales like me, is 100 grand is actually not going to buy you too much in terms of the PPR. So they're like, look, let's buckle down for the next 5 years to see where we'll get and how much money we'll have saved. So two ways to do that is save as much as your income as possible, or use the 100 grand, invest, and then save as much as possible as well. So in the savings side, First off, I started at 30%, but then I thought, look, you know what? That's 30% is a lot. So I decided to actually run a few assumptions, and that is of this take-home after-tax combined income of 150, 200 grand, 250 grand total. What happens if you save 20%? What happens if you save 25%? And what happens if you save 30% of that take-home income? Now, obviously, I've ran through year 1, year 2, year 3, year 4, year 5. We're starting with the 100 grand that we have saved and also 20% of this amount, which in year 1 is 137. Then we save another 25%, meaning our savings buffer, our savings amount goes up, goes up, goes up, goes up. Now, obviously, the more we can save, and 30% is a really good savings amount, we can get to 380,500. That is the most we can save if we save 30% of our income in the next 5 years, earning 150. Now, obviously, I haven't put in here any salary increases because that just gets too tricky and it's hard to forecast. So keep in mind your salaries might go up. Maybe there's a bit of lifestyle creep there and the savings amount is still the same. But $380,000 after 5 years if you're saving 30% of your take-home salary. So that's your position. These three numbers are your position if you save 20, 25, or 30% after the 5th year of just saving it alone. This is where it gets interesting. Now, the 100 grand saved, as you would have known if you've been following my YouTube for a little while, we know that can get us into about a $550,000 investment purchase, which is pretty decent. So let's look at the entry costs to make sure we're both on the same page. We're going to pay a 12% deposit. I'm going to put in a video that pops up here that tells you why you need to be putting down a 12% deposit versus a 10%. We pay 22 grand stamp duty. Again, stamp duty will vary state to state, so I try to pick an average. 6 grand of LMI, 2 grand in legals, $500 for building a pest, and 2.5 grand of other. I always inflate that 2.5 grand of other because that will cover things like PEXA, bank establishment fees, and all those little things. And I know that there'll be a little bit left over, but I'd rather tell you to have it and not need it than you need it and not have it saved. That gets us to 99,000. So we've almost saved, we've almost used 100% of our savings. We've thrown it into a $550,000 property purchase compared to keeping it in the bank. Now, let's run through holding costs. Again, one thing I've constantly said too is I think is an unrealistic interest rate for a long term, especially over the next 6 years. I got some emails this week because we had a rate cut saying that my interest rates on my properties are now all in the fives, which is really good. But I've modeled it off 6 and I've modeled it also off a 4.5%, which is a little bit more conservative and I think is a better average to take over the long term. So obviously the rent, I've assumed a 5% rental yield and also a 4% per year rental increase. Pretty conservative with figures. I had a gentleman comment the other day that 5% rental yield is not conservative and it's quite high. My comment and sort of response to that would be 5% in Victoria isn't, but I think if you go conservative across the states, across like each of the states, especially Eastern Seaboard, I think 5% is conservative. So remember, it's not just where you're buying at the moment, which is Victoria, which people are seeing yields in the high 3s, low 4s, those kinds of things. Remember, it's just the ballpark average across all the states. So year one, 27,500 in rent. We know what our expenses are. Our expenses are going to be our loan amount, which is 495 grand, 495K at 6%. And then I add on top $10,000, and that's for leasing, releasing fees, maintenance, insurance, council rates, all those kinds of things. I've covered it in other videos as well. If you're welcome to scroll back and have a look. But that's how we get to what our costs are. So I've kept that 6% interest rate and our expenses the same over the 5 years. And for our rent has increased slightly, 4% per year, leaving us in a gross position of negative 1211, and you can see it slowly starts to decrease over 5 years because our rent is increasing. And I've done the same for 4.5%, which as you can see is a lot more palatable, which leaves us to a total down here of negative 12,428 over 5 years if our property was at 4.5%, and negative 49,553 over 5 years if our property was at 6% interest rate for those entire 5 years. Now, obviously, we would negative gear that because we are professionals and we get that advice from our accountant, and we'll be able to get about 30% back in tax. So I've taken that off these two amounts, meaning the 49 comes down to 34,000 and the 12,000 comes down to 8,700. Now remember as well, with this particular circumstance of buying an investment property, it does cost you a little bit per year, but we're also still able to save. So what I've done is I've taken the 8,700 in costs, and I've taken the 100,000 that I've used up here, and I've come to these amounts here, year 5. So I'd have 287,000, but I've also went, okay, let's take off the 100 grand entry costs, and let's take off the 8,700, leaving me in year 5 at a 6% interest rate, meaning I would be at a cash amount of 152. Now that's if I'm saving, again at 20%, if I'm saving 20% of my salary minus the costs that it takes to hold that investment property. Hope that makes sense. Obviously, if I save 25% of my salary, and I still have that negatively geared investment property, or 30% of my salary and I have that negatively geared investment property. That's where I end at 6%, and that's where I end up at 6%, 152, 199, 245. If interest rates are at 4.5%, obviously I have a little bit more money left over and my position doesn't look too bad. Now, obviously, if we look at 380 versus 240, we go, oh shit, it looks like it's better for us to save. But remember, we've got an investment property that we've leveraged our money into. So we've leveraged 100 grand. Now we have $550,000 worth of property that's increasing per year. Again, I've went pretty conservative on a growth cycle. We're going to look at the data. We're going to be able to pick and forecast those regions. First year, this is my 5-year running. This is my 5-year growth cycle, just so we're on the same page. First year's at 6, second year's at 10, third year's at 20, fourth year's at 10, fifth year's at 6%. So obviously, when a property goes up and that market goes up to 10, 20%, it just doesn't fall off a cliff the next day. It takes some time to cool off, which is why we have 10 to 6. Now, after the first year of that property that I buy for 550, it increases to 583, increases 6%. It then increases 10% to 641. It then increases 20% to 769. It then increases 10% in year 4 to 846, and then 6% the year after to 897,306. Now, in year 5, we've got a property worth $900,000, 900 grand. It's got $495,000 of debt. Let's just say I've paid down 0 debt, interest only repayments. I'm left with 405K of equity and of usable equity. In terms of usable equity, 80% of 900 would be 720. I've got 495 of a loan still hanging about. Oh, extra 0 missing. So I've got $225,000 of usable equity. So I could quit there, or I could sell the property, and as you'll see when we sell it out, what is our difference? It's actually funny because it's almost that figure, but let's run through. So now I decide in year 5, we're going to sell down that investment property. We're going to cash out. We're going to pay our tax. We're going to get that money in our hand with the savings that we've made, and we'll see if we can beat 380,000. So calculation of cost base, my friends and family, is the $550,000 purchase price. We have then $550,000 purchase price. We've got $33,000 of entry costs. That is stamps, LMI, legals, B&P, and all your other costs. We've got $5,000 in marketing when we sell it, and we've got $17,946. I've just done that as 2% of the sale price. That's why it looks like a bit of a cooked number. Could have probably rounded that up to 900, but I would have got yelled at in the comments. So my cost base is my purchasing price, all the costs associated with purchasing, all the costs associated with selling. Now, obviously for this cost base and to keep this video super simple and easy to follow, I'm going to assume that during the 5 years, you're claiming all your tax back, like we've done here, and there is no depreciation on the property. Otherwise, it just becomes a little bit messy. Meaning we have a cost base of $605,946. So if we come in, we say, okay, we sold for $897,306. We have a cost base of $605,946. Means we've made a capital gain of $291,360. Now in Australia, as you know, we have the CGT exemption rule, meaning 50% of that, which is $145,680, we keep tax free, and then we pay tax on the other $145,680. Now, obviously, 45% tax, it equals $65,556, leaving us, after we pay the tax, $80,124. I plus that on to $145,680. And ladies and gentlemen, I get a capital gain after I've paid all my tax of $225,804. So I have $225,804 of gains after I've paid all my tax. And then I've also got the money that I've saved up over the last 5 years after I've paid for the negatively geared investment property. Okay, so let's look where we sit. If I bought an investment property, I held it for 5 years, I sold it, it did the growth cycle that we've predicted, I would be sitting with $225,804 in capital gain, plus, if I'm only saving 20% of my salary, $152,312, meaning I'd have $378,116 compared to up here, which is only $287. If I save 25% of my salary, which is $119 plus this $225, I'd have $424. Or if I had $380 plus the $225 equals 471. So as you can see, I would be $100,000 better off. Doesn't matter how much of my money I save. Each scenario it goes up because this base is the same, but it'd be $100,000 better off. Now, if I'm fortunate enough to have that particular scenario with a 4.5% interest rate on the debt, I'd be $117,000 better off. The 404, how do I get to that? It's obviously 225 plus 178. That gives me a $404,000 cash profit. So as we can see from here, if I'm just saving my money up, this is where I'm sitting at. Compared to if I buy an investment property, I get that investment property working for me, I'm going to be in a slightly better position, anywhere from $90,000 to $120,000 if I was to buy an investment property, ride it up the wave and sell it after over a 5-year time frame. That, my friends, is should you invest in one investment property when you're trying to save up for your PPR, or should you just save your money? Let me know thoughts in the comments. As always, I'll see you tomorrow.